Alrighty guys, welcome back to another video. This one, I believe we're posting up as free content, and it's an interesting topic. This one is going to be about anti-podding. If you haven't seen our videos before, I'm Realm, this is Myth. We are running a subscription service through the SuperCoach Hub Discord. Check our page on Twitter, on Instagram, or the SuperCoach Hub themselves. You'll see where to sign up or where to see our other free content and have a look through. Myth, how are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited because footy's almost here.
That's it. And I'm not sure when this is exactly going up, but I could be in the air to Vegas by that point. So fun times ahead. This video, anti-podding. Last year we both started with a few pods in our team. My pods that I started off with went fantastic. Had Lomax to start. Nano was okay. Robson was great to start. And I feel like it was those pods themselves that got me to that top 10 ranking by round 7, round 8. You started with a few pods to start the season yourself. Did you want to chat? How'd they go for you? How did you utilize them? How many would you have gone?
Yeah, so I had Nanai as well, who was great as a hold up until Origin. I started with the Hammer last year, who went bang, bang, round 1 and round 2. That was quite useful. And I think we both lined up with very cheap 5.8s, which kind of went against a large part of the crowd who were on Dylan Brown.
Yep.
They were probably my biggest areas to start off with, and avoiding some of them. Like I didn't have Helam Lukey, I didn't have Sean Lane. So it was the anti-pods just as much as the pods that resulted in
Yeah, definitely. Like I sold a Sean Lane after round 1. I sold Taylor May very quickly. I didn't go in RTS. Those type of guys were huge to miss, I think, for the start of the year. Dylan Brown, exactly like you said, I got a Kyle Flanagan instead, and he made $100,000 and then moved on. So it couldn't have worked out better for me. But in this video today, the team you're seeing on screen, this is a makeup of the highest owned players. So we just put all the highest owned players in the one team, where there was about $400,000 left over, and Marju was 1% off. So we switched out Savelio Tamale for a Greg Marju. The odds of running all these cheapies plus Tamale is unlikely. So we've put Marju in, and there's still $180,000 left over. So still a bit of play money to use. We'll run through from top to bottom real quick. We've got Connor Watson, Mamazelis, and Hooker, Terrell May, Corey Horsburgh, Royce Hunt, Miles Martin in front row. I assume Miles Martin will be interchangeable with any other nuff. So Simpkins is pretty popular. There's a couple of others. Second row, Hamoli Olakawatu, Isaiah Papali'i, Fine Filiaki, Tino Fa'asul Mala'awe, Naf White, Vimorga. In the 2RF, halves, Cleary, Shannon Smith, 5'8", Luai, and Luke Metcalf. Centre wing, Garrick, Marju, Bird, and Jesse Arthurs is somehow snuck in here now. Jackson Purju, Jesse McLean, Robert Toya, and then the fullback, we see the very common Ponga, Turbo, and Ayongi build. Just having a quick look through the team and kind of the builds you've made so far, roughly what percentage of this lineup have made it into yours, you reckon?
The front row and fullbacks are very similar. A lot of the centre wing is similar. The part that I'm noticing the biggest difference is in the back row and the halves.
Yep.
And a big part of today is the benefits of starting vanilla versus the anti-pods and picking and choosing where you're going about it. I know you obviously have the 3-gun fullbacks there. So you've got...
Yeah, I think that in itself is massive pod. And hypothetically, let's just pull up here the ownership percentages. Ayongi's at 58%, so I think he's the highest owned player in the game now, slightly above Sandon Smith. So yeah, not going him is a huge pod. And sorry, did you have a question there?
Yeah. So you've identified that as a position where you essentially want an anti-pod. You're going against Ayongi and you're going for the 3-gun fullbacks with a lot of extra cash spent there. So you've identified that as an area, and why?
I don't think it's Ayongi specifically or the position that I'm anti-podding. I think it's just having the 3-gun fullbacks themselves is a pod play. Walsh specifically, I've talked about how I find the Broncos is a very, very solid team this year, and I think they'll come out of the gates quite hot. Having a key piece of them, and Reece Walsh specifically, is huge for me for starting quick. I'm not opposed to bringing in Ayongi when I need to, but I think having a Reece Walsh from a red-hot Broncos compared to Ayongi, who's got Melbourne and Dogs in the first 3 rounds, and with so many question marks and the Eels' performance, I'm more keen to take the punt on the 3-gun fullbacks than try and figure that out later on.
Yeah, so essentially there's two different sections. You're going an antipod against the cheapy fullback, but the antipod is the fact that not many people are going to be running 3-gun fullbacks. We know it's the highest upside position, and you're going to have one more ticket in the raffle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I'm not afraid to sell a fullback if needs be to Ayongi, but this way I at least have, an extra shot at having the right gun fullback to start the year.
And you've got Ponga in there, you've got Turbo in there. We see in this build there's Trbojevic and there's Ruben Garrick. I see a lot of people probably at this point in the season are starting to get tempted on, can I do better than Ruben Garrick? Do I want to have both of these guys? Now, they're both above 30% ownership, but something I think people need to keep in mind here is their combined ownership, the amount of teams running both of them, is probably substantially lower. Like, we can't calculate the numbers right at this point, but I'd be pretty confident to say maybe 15% at the highest would be running both. Just given 30 and 30, there are a lot of teams that won't actually have Turbo. Nearly 70% don't. Wild, because you see a lot of him in the SuperCoach community. But in terms of starting off and getting up to the pointy end, Turbo's quite lowly owned in context there. So whilst it could be tempting there to antipod Manly and go against one or two of them, with their draw, it's one where I'm going, I want to go with a pack here. But it might be something I keep in mind for when their draw gets tougher of going, maybe I'll jump off one.
Yeah, and look, without giving too much away, because obviously our subscribers are paying the monthly subscription to see a lot of this information. We have done analysis on the Big Four from Melbourne and the Big Four from Manly when they all play together, how they perform compared to their season average, how they perform at home together. Without giving specifics away, I will say that Garrick is quite the beneficiary of all four playing together. So that's just a insight into some of the stuff we do and to Garrick himself. So it's quite hard to go against him, and especially the pairing if they do come out firing. And like we said, maybe 15 to 20% combined ownership. It's definitely that's almost pod level themselves. But I do want to throw in this 2RF gun here, Olakau'atu. He's the seventh highest owned, and he's the seventh highest owned 2RF, and he's the highest owned above 600k. The other guns you'd throw in there, Isaiah Papali'i, Connor Watson, but he's up in the hooker position mainly, and then even a Tino at a stretch. But again, he's mainly front row forward you'd see in builds. Olakau'atu is the clear-cut favourite for 2RF. And with the ownership of Garrick, the ownership of Turbo, that's surprising to me. Would you think that's just based off draw, or these Olakau'atu owners not owning one of Garrick, Turbo, or how many people you reckon are tripling up?
I wouldn't think there's going to be many people tripling up, but I think people are on him because of the draw, which is fair enough. Look, there's a lot of reasons to pick Olakau'atu. He's shown he can go massive. He doesn't seem to do it too often, but it's a very favourable draw. And if Manly do fly and they're putting points on teams, it only takes one crash over try for him to put up a good score. So I can understand the appeal. It's also somewhere where I can go, okay, that's too much Manly for me, because whilst it might start me well, how's it going to go when that draw stiffens up a little bit? Do I want to diversify? Is that a player I can take on with someone cheaper? Is that someone where I can go more expensive? I think the second row with the question marks on a few of them is a very good area to potentially swerve the pack and look for some different options.
Yeah, definitely. This is an area that I'm looking to antipod as well. Homoli Olakau'atu specifically, because I've got Garrick and Turbo in pretty much all my builds. I don't want to triple up with them because throughout the season, they're going to go on rough runs, rough parts of the draw. And Olakau'atu, Garrick, and Turbo aren't guys you're selling and flipping constantly. Those are guys you hold. And through that rough period, they could all be on a down average. So I definitely think getting away from one of them would be the play. And Olakau'atu is easily that choice for me. Looking at the other 600k plus guys, we'll include Fermore's at 2% because of that buy to start with. He looked great on the weekend. You got Preston, who's at 10%. Before the trials, he was on 4%. So that's a massive jump. Lucas is himself 13%, is pretty solid. Go up the list. There's the Hopgood at 10%. And then even the top guns, Fafita on 2% is absolutely wild. Eli Katoa, 9%. There's so many good options here at half the ownership, if not less, than Olakau'atu, who could all outscore him to start the season. So, yeah, is there any options that stand out to you specifically, or are you still tossing it up?
Oh, I'm still tossing it up. There's a lot of good options there. Fafita's been in drafts. I've had Preston in drafts, Lucas in drafts. I've had IPAP in drafts. I've had Watson there. I think there's a lot of good players to look at for that position. And I think it's one that's going to be quite varied between teams to start the year. But I guess we could talk a while here. When looking for an antipod, when you're looking to swerve the pack, what are you looking for?
There's a couple of things that I look at, and I can even, because I've done a player profile on this guy, Jacob Preston. So just for example, while we're talking about this position, Jacob Preston looked like a great pod, and he was the first player profile I think I put out in 2024 for this season coming. With him, the Bulldogs, I don't own. There's no Bulldogs in any of the top owned guys. So already there's not many people owning Bulldogs players. The draw to start the season is pretty solid, and last year he was quite injury affected. So his average when playing 70 plus minutes goes up towards a 70, whereas you can see he's priced at a 62 based on him playing 67 minutes last season. So there's already upside there. He's not highly owned, and he's probably going to be the beneficiary of a few attacking stats in that good draw. So that's someone I'd look to start the season hot and then potentially even move to an Olakau'atu down the line. So that's kind of how I've looked at Preston. That's how I looked at Robson last season as well when picking him in that hooker position, and he came out of the gates flying towards an 80 average for the first 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit there. I think when you're looking at this structure of a side, I think there's a lot of different areas you could build your side to take advantage of it. I think immediately you could forego one of the center wing mids there in Arthurs or Bird and find your way up to a different gun. A lot of them are going to be pretty lowly owned. You've got the Iongi. You could go the third gun fullback. Being able to have a pod who is a premium asset that's shown the ability to do it is great. We haven't spoken about Nicho Hynes, but in this build, there's no second gun halfback. There's an easy way to go more of a pod route. Nicho Hynes, I think, is around that. What's he there?
20%.
20% on the button. That's still relatively low for someone with Nicho's ceiling and what he can do.
Luai is and to think about the Cleary and Hynes ownership together, that's going to be incredibly low. Like that would be barely pushing 10%, you'd imagine. So having that combination itself is quite pod.
You can go vanilla here and have some good antipods and really good pods. I think that's the message that we're trying to get out here. And picking and choosing where you're going against guns. If you're going against a gun that has got SuperCoach pedigree of 80 plus averages for multiple years, has good fixtures, has a high ceiling, that's a tough guy to antipod. But going against someone like a Jerome Luai there, who, for example, is unknown at the Tigers, 3-time wooden spooners, we don't really know what to expect from him. That's a guy where I'm going, okay, that's for someone I want to take on. And add in the fact that the options, you've got Jaden Campbell, you've got Dylan Brown, you've got Matt Burton with a good draw, you've got Lockie Galvin himself, Cameron Munster. There's so many guys here that I think you can use to take him on. And that's what I'm looking at. Where's an antipod where I don't think they can hurt me too much? That's where I want a pod.
Definitely. And Luai is a prime example of someone that I think's over-owned, whether that's based on hype, whether that's based on the numbers last year when he was playing in that sole kind of playmaker role when Cleary was out. But to keep in mind, he was behind the Penrith pack with Penrith backs, with Dylan Edwards there, Isaiah Yeo feeding him as well. So, he had the world at his feet in that side and could basically do anything he wanted. And that's boosted his average up to that 60 mark. Looking at this coming season, he's almost 600K. If we're looking at other guys that are 600K, like Cam Munster, Dillbags for 650, even a Jaden Campbell for just 100 grand more, those are guys that I do genuinely believe could average over that 70 mark, whereas I think Luai's max is probably about what he's at, if not maybe 65 at most. That's how I view him. I can't see him hitting those 70-plus heights of those other guys, and it's a prime spot where I'd be looking at antipod.
And he might do it. He could. If he's if he brings the Tigers up, if he's that sole guy, he could do it. It's just identifying the spot where you could antipod. He's not going to be captained. Those captaincy options are much harder to antipod compared to those guys that aren't, because missing that 130 from a Luai isn't going to hurt as missing a 140 from Cleary, for example, because Cleary's going to have VCNC on him. So I think it's just something to keep in mind moving forward. And again, we could talk for ages here, but I'm loving the amount of variety we can have. Just be careful where you're deciding to swerve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, just before we finish up, it's important to say that, and I believe you agree with me here, is that starting vanilla, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm a big advocate for starting vanilla. When you're looking at places to anti-pod, or the players that you like to use as pods, like a Preston, for example, a Fletcher Sharp, someone along those lines, a Lockie Galvin, you're not just doing it for the sake of it. You're doing it because you've got reasoning behind it. You've got reasoning to go against the highest owned guy there, or the top owned gun, like an Olakawatu, Luai, for example. And you're not doing it in every single position, because if individually they might all look great, but when you're grouping them all together, they are pods for a reason. And if too many of them fail, you're going to be behind the pack. So I think just picking your spots is really important to start the year, and making sure that you do have that solid reasoning behind it.
At the moment, we've got no proper game information. We've been dealing with trials, we've been dealing with preseason reports. It's the hardest time. We have the least amount of information to go off. So if you go with all your pods early, you could be correcting mistakes. If you go with a few, you can correct them if they go wrong. And if they go well, you'll probably fly anyway. So it's spreading out the amount of times you're going to go pods throughout the season, waiting for that more information. A safe pick now might mean the opportunity to go a really good pod that not many people can get to later.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think we'll wrap things up there. If you liked what we were talking about, if you found our content interesting, we've got a lot more free content online and through the Discord, the SuperCoach Hub Discord. If you were interested in seeing more of our private content, there is ways to sign up through the Discord. If you have any questions, any problems, hit up the SuperCoach Hub team or Myth or myself. We're more than happy to help out and answer any questions you guys have. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Hold on for a second. Just for anyone that hasn't seen us before, obviously there's a lot of content out there. We're not going to say we're going to be better than others. We're looking to do things a little bit differently. But if you haven't seen our names out there before, Realms, the last 5 years, finished in the top 1,004 years. And he's had stints at number 1, another stint at number 10. So he's been up that pointy end. I've, over the last 11 years, have finished in the top 500 7 times, and of those 7 times, 3 of them have been top 100. So we like to think we've got the track record to know what we're talking about to some extent. Yeah. Every season's different. We want to back people to go their gut. We're just looking at that reasoning for these decisions that we're making.
Yeah, definitely. We don't want to be telling you what to do and what not to do. We just want to give you the tools to make your own decision.
Perfect.
All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll chat to you next time.